Hi, and welcome to a new video. In this video, we will deal with 3 different approaches to servicing a watch. When should I service my watch? Or when does my watch need a service? It's probably one of the most asked questions out there for people who are new to mechanical watches. And really there are different answers for different types of watches. The perspective on servicing a watch can be very different if you own a watch that just cost a couple of $100, for a watch that costs a couple of $1,000, and for a vintage watch or a watch that is very complicated and costs a lot of money. Servicing a mechanical watch today usually is pretty costly and takes a lot of time. Depending on the type of watch, you could probably wait half a year until the watch returns to your wrist, and it probably costs about $1,000. So the answer on how to and when to service your watch can be very different depending on the watch that we are talking about. And different people have different opinions about that topic. And here are 3 different approaches to deal with the topic of servicing a watch. There are people that don't ever service their watch. If the watch stops and breaks, they scrap it and get a new one. These are usually people that are not necessarily very deeply involved into watches. They use it as a tool, they wear it every day, they're not really like watch nerds or watch geeks. I don't want to put anyone into a corner here, but for some people, they just don't care about stuff. They buy it because they like it and they wear it, and if it breaks, they just stop wearing it and wear another watch instead. This could happen to people who wear a watch that costs $200, and there are also probably people who wear a $10,000 watch that they just don't care about if it breaks. The second way to think about it is to service a mechanical watch by the book. Listen to the manufacturer and bring it to a service every 3 to 8 years, depending on what the recommendation is. These are the people who sort of do the preventative maintenance on a watch, much like doing an oil change on your car in regular intervals. And these are people who usually do care about their stuff, and they also probably care about the watches, and who listen to the retailers who tell them that the watch is due for service in 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, whatever. And that's what they do. They send the watch in, they pay the service fee, and get the watch back serviced. This is something that can happen at any price point. There are probably people who do that with $200 watches, and obviously also the owner of a Patek Philippe who sells for about $1 million probably also does that. And then there is a third option that people debate, and those are the people who just service the watch when it breaks. They keep wearing the watch as long as it will work, and they will just send it in to have it rebuilt or serviced when it doesn't keep time anymore, or if it develops other problems, if the crown comes off, or some of the functions stop. And those people have a different approach to it, and usually their argument is that, well, wearing it until it breaks, in the end, costs probably the same money or is even less expensive than having the watch serviced every 3 to 5 years. And in the following, we will look at these different options a little bit more in detail. And actually, that last part can make sense, and I will tell you why. But generally, it is very difficult to tell you when your watch needs to be serviced. Watch movements are very different. There are movements who are built in the millions, like ETA and Celita movements or Seiko movements, and they usually have a pretty good track record of working for almost 10 years without a problem. But as a consumer, you never know what kind of damage they attain during those years of work. And also, every watch is different, and every watch gets worn in a different climate and in different conditions. People are differently active in their everyday life, so it's very difficult to put a precise number on that. You have your intervals, and it's good to do the maintenance in those intervals, but really it can break in between anyway. And that's the argument for the last point, that just servicing it when it breaks saves you money in case it would break anyway. Because it is a delicate mechanism, and if you've had it serviced and it comes back and you immediately crash your bike and the watch breaks again, you're in for another $500 to $1,000. So, well, that argument can make sense. Here are some of my conclusions. This debate is very different when we talk about vintage versus new watches. With vintage watches, if you wear them regularly, I would really have them serviced about every 5 years and make sure that they are in a good condition, usually because parts are difficult to obtain. And if the watch breaks, the service cost is usually a lot higher than a sort of run-of-the-mill watch would cost to repair. Modern watches, especially in the low to mid price range, use Bosch movements that are from third parties like ETA, Seiko, Sellita, and oftentimes in more inexpensive watches, who are also sort of the mass market watches, in a service, these movements get swapped instead of serviced. So if you send in a watch that has an ETA movement, and that used to be the case, for example, with Breitlings, there's a very good chance that Breitling will just take out the ETA movement and put in a brand new one, because it's a lot more cost effective to just do that, to just buy a new movement and put it in, instead of taking a lot of time and a lot of resources to service your old movement. And if I'm correct, Tudor does that in a different way. Tudor takes out the movement from your watch and puts in a newly serviced movement so that you can get your watch back quicker, and then takes your old movement, services it, and then puts it back as a replacement movement into the pool of movements. So that's how different companies use a service to be cost effective. If you really like the watch the way you had it, and if you have a watch that has matching numbers, matching case to movement and stuff like that, a service really takes a lot more time. And if you break an Arlang & Söhne, or if your Arlang & Söhne needs a real service and you bring it back to the company, they will repair exactly that one movement, and obviously that will be a lot more expensive. It can make sense to wear your watch until it does not hold its time, or the movement fails in some way, and only then have it serviced. Because if you have, for example, a Seiko that cost you $350, it is probably a lot more inexpensive to wear it for 10 years and have it break after 8, and then have it repaired instead of having paid 2 times to have it serviced. But this theory can also make sense for watches that are a little bit more expensive. For example, Rolex. It can make sense to wear your Rolex until it stops, because it is so well made that it might work 10 or 15 years. And then you have to do one service, and if it's a new watch, the parts are available, and you're only paying once for a service. And after getting back the watch works the same way as it would have if you would have it had serviced every 5 years. As I said, for vintage watches and for watches with in-house movements, it's a lot more complicated, because it often makes sense to pay attention to the service interval and do the preventative maintenance. And usually those watches are that expensive that the cost for a service, and usually for those watches, the price of a service is a much lower percentage of the retail price, that it makes sense to invest that money into having the watch serviced, because it helps to retain the value of the watch. So these are different approaches to looking at having a watch serviced. I'm very interested in how you handle that topic and what your experiences are, so feel free to write them down in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Like and subscribe if you don't want to miss out on new videos in the future. And you can also follow me on Instagram for more content. You find the link for Instagram in the video description. If you have any watchmaking related questions, or if you have any ideas for future videos, feel free to comment them in the comment section down below. Thank you, and I hope to see you in the next video again.